Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to the Aliyah. Boker Tov. It's a brand new week. It is the week of Parashah Beshalach, the Parashah of Song. And today we are diving in, no pun intended, to the beginning of the Red Sea story. This reading today actually is the reading for the seventh day of Pesach, because the last day of Pesach is the anniversary of the crossing of the Red Sea. So today we're going to be talking about the slave mentality. This is the mentality that keeps us bound in so many ways, in various hundreds ways, to living the life that is not the life that God wants for us. And we're going to find some interesting things here as we study today's parashah. One of the things we're going to see is that in the parashah today, there's still a level of doubt. There's, it's interesting as we talk about Jewish people, if you look at anti-missionaries who are trying to say that Yeshua is not the Messiah, one of the thought processes is that when the Messiah comes, everybody will accept him. That's more or less kind of putting it very simplistically. And we see here something very interesting is in Parashat Beshalach and the second Aliyah, Pharaoh is coming against the people with his chariots. And this is where we have the famous passage right before the parting of the Red Sea, where the people cry out to God and they say, "Were there no graves in Egypt that you took us to die in the wilderness? What is this that you have done to us to take us out of Egypt? Is this not the statement that we made to you in Egypt, saying, 'Let us be, and we will serve Egypt, for it is better that we should serve Egypt than that we should die in the wilderness'?" There's a lot to unpack out of that. We're going to get into that topic here in just a moment, and then dive into some, again, no pun intended, into some other thoughts from Rabbi Torski on this, the slave mentality, and what can we glean from it, and what does it show us about our current situation in the lives of people, and what are some other analogies that we might look at that are other potential slave mentality concepts? We'll do our best to try to unpack as much of this as possible. But before we do that, let's say a good and hearty good morning. Boker Tov to Peaches, formerly from Georgia. Glad you're here. Good morning, Heather Wilson. Hope you and Zachary are doing great. Good morning, Lantern Lights and Hepzibah and Ahava. Good morning, Lori. Good morning, Roy. Good to see you, sir. It's been a minute, I think, since we've been able to see you live. Good morning, Shoshana. And Johan, Boker Tov. Hot in South Africa. Woo. I can only imagine. Good morning, Chris and Crystal. Good morning, Attila. Ariela Rabiela, good morning to you. Brenda, Boker Tov. Donna Jones, Boker Tov to you. Clay, good morning. Wendeley de los Santos, good morning to you. Katura, hope you're having a great day. Good morning, Seth. Hope you and Sonia are doing great. And hope Sonia is recovering beautifully from her procedure. Good morning to Kimba Mint. And Sergio, Boker Tov. And good morning to Greg. Nellie Grace, Boker Tov. Samuel Dykes, good morning to you. Kathy, Boker Tov. Denise, I hope you're doing great. Jolene, Boker Tov to you. Good to see you this morning. Good morning, Jubilee. Hope you're doing well. Anthony, Boker Tov. Jody, Boker Tov. -16 there in Canada. Wow. Yikesers. Good morning, Amita. Good morning, Sarah. Hope you and Shane are doing great. Good morning, Leah. Hope you and Shmuel are doing fantastic. Good morning to Chase Hansen. Good morning, Chase. There's our reporter. Chase, we've got to get you in the White House as our Lapid live reporter, Baruch HaShem. And who else we have? Hulda. We got to think of a good tagline for our news station. Like "We report, you decide," or whatever the other ones are. We need to have a good one. Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, Thelma. Good morning, John. Good morning, Amana. Zohan, good morning. Good morning to Beard of Prey. She's starting a new job in childcare. Well, Baruch HaShem, good for her. Well, good morning, Atara. Glad you're here. And on Facebook, that is. And good morning, Janine. Hope you're doing great as well. Baruch HaShem. By the way, as many of you are already aware, I finally got the Halacha posted, and it's on the website. It's on the lapidjudaism.org website underneath the About Us link, I believe it is. And it's a 96-page document. Now, I do want to say that the Halacha that we have is not it's not all inclusive. It doesn't answer every single question. Otherwise, it would be probably 5 volumes long. And we are, as the need arises, as questions come up, and we think, oh yeah, that should probably be in there. That's a common question, or what have you. We will add it to the Halacha. So therefore, the Halacha is meant to be kind of like a hit the high points, hit the important things, hit the basics. And I also want to say that I think that for a lot of people, the Halacha document that we posted is enough. Sometimes, and I don't want to get off onto this psychological topic, but sometimes people come in and they want to become like a super hardcore Hasidic Haredi Jew, like between now and next July, and not realizing that, that level is, less than probably 5% of the Jews in the world who grew up this way live that way, and they're only able to live that way because their communities are super, like everybody around them is that way. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just not. It's like saying you want to be a Marine Raider and you haven't even gone to boot camp yet. Like you haven't even signed up yet. So you just, anyway, okay. What I'm trying to say is the Halacha we have is probably enough for 99.9% of the people. But again, if you're going through it and you're thinking that there's something that needs to be in there that you think it might need to be in there because you've had a lot of questions about it or whatever, let us know. Let us know. And I will tell you what else is in there. And that is that, and Shmuel will appreciate this. We have a section in there now on hunting wild game. So that's in the Halacha. So lots of interesting things. Good morning, Christina, there on Facebook as well. So let's dive into this slave mentality. It's interesting to me as we look at this, where the people say, where there are no graves in Egypt. We look at that and say, well, these are people who, after all that God has done, they're doubting. And that's true. That's true. But I also want to point out the fact that if we look at this, as we often do, trying to distinguish the patterns that we are, needing to see. What's indicated here in this text is that the people have doubted Moses from the beginning. They did not accept him as their redeemer, okay, as their Messiah, if you will. Let's use the term Messiah for the sake of our discussion. They did not accept him from the very beginning. And remember what I told you, that the whole reason that Moses had to go to the wilderness and spend 40 years in the wilderness was precisely because his own people rejected him. They are the ones who turned him over to Pharaoh. Does that sound familiar? And so, but of course, had he not gone to the wilderness, he would not have met Jethro. He would not have met Zipporah. He would not have found the staff. He would not have had the experience at the burning bush. So obviously, all of that was necessary, and we've discussed in detail. Good morning, Rebbetzin. We've we've discussed in detail all the spiritual ramifications of all of those various and sundry things. Okay. Now he comes back to Egypt, and he is, affecting, if you will, he's not himself doing it. God is doing it, of course, but he's affecting the miracles. And we learned that, 80% of the people that he went there to save, 80% of them refused to leave, and they end up dying in Egypt. And the reason they died, of course, is because they, had a slave mentality. Okay, so that was all, part of the issue. They had a slave mentality. They wanted to stay in Egypt. But here we learn the people who actually did, the 20% who came out, they said in verse 12, chapter 14, verse 12 of the book of Exodus, is this not the statement that we made to you in Egypt, saying, let us be, and we will serve Egypt? For it is better that we should serve Egypt than we should die in the wilderness. Now, there are so many things we could talk about with respect to this statement, but let me begin by saying the pattern is really simple. Okay. When the Messiah comes, and here the Messiah we're talking about is the type, the pattern is talking about Moses. We did not accept Moses. We did not believe Moses. And evidently, I have to believe that from verse 12, that even the people that came out of Egypt followed Moses half-heartedly with suspicion. They didn't really want to leave. Now, what does this teach us? Well, the idea that is put out there by the anti-missionaries is when Messiah comes, basically we'll know it because he'll check all these different boxes, and we're going to, it'll be clear. No, it won't. In other words, what I'm trying to say is part of the pattern of the true Messiah is that we will doubt him. We won't want to follow him. He won't make sense to us. We will rather stay in our present condition. That's the pattern. So when you look at the course of history and you see what messianic figure in Judaism meets that qualification, there's really only one. If you look at all the other would-be messiahs in Judaism, they had the vast majority of Jews followed them. A slight minority opposed them. This is true of Bar Kokhba, to list two. This is true of Bar Kokhba. This is also true of Shabbatai Zvi. Of course, there are other messianic figures, but most the messianic figures in Judaism have swept away most of the population. Which messianic figure does his people basically, they don't really receive him? And that, of course, is Yeshua. So that's an interesting pattern. Let's also talk about the slave mentality. It's not is it not the statement that we made to you in Egypt, saying, let us be, and we will serve Egypt? For it's better that we should serve Egypt than we should die in the wilderness. This mindset of just wanting to be status quo, don't upset the apple cart. Just let us enjoy, all the benefits and so forth and so on. Even if it means, that we have to suffer, that's okay. That we'd rather do that than follow truth. There, a lot of this has to do the slave mentality. In my opinion, there's a laziness to it. There's a disingenuous nature to it. There is we talk about the fact that on the channel, a lot of times people will tune in and they'll ask us a question, and they'll say, "Hey, what about this?" And then we'll say, "Okay, here is a video or a series of videos that actually directly address your question in depth. And then 9 times out of 10, their response is, no, I don't want to watch your video. I don't have time to watch your video. I don't want to spend the time to do that. I want you to tell me now on this thread, answer my question. If we respond and say, look, we're not going to respond on the thread. It's too long. There's too much information. The video has the content. You should really invest the time. Then they'll accuse us of trying to, like, we can't answer their question, or we lost the argument because, see, you're scared to answer. You don't have an answer, so that's why you're a liar and a cult figure. I mean, it's bizarre, right? This happened just yesterday. There was a gentleman who had a question about Yeshua being the Pharisee. I shared with him the video compilation we have on this, the playlist, and he said, okay, well, can you just give me, I see your playlist, but can you just give me like a couple of points where that validates this? And I said, no, it wouldn't do it justice. You really need to watch the video because you're going to get an in-depth answer there, and it'll answer all of your questions instead of me sitting here trying to give you a couple of 1-2 punches. That's really wouldn't do you any good. Then he said, well, the problem is it's about 4 hours worth of videos, and which, I mean, I get it. So that's, it's an investment of time, but it's worth it. And he says it's 4 hours worth of videos, and if you're not wanting to answer my question here is really going to turn people off because it's showing that you're like a cult, and even though you can't answer the question, bunch of incoherent rambling. And here's the point: I told the person, I said, somebody who's reading this thread, who's going to read this thread? 5 people, 10 people, 20 people. Let's just say 100 people. I don't know. I doubt it'd be that high. However, on the playlist, if you do the math and all the different videos on that particular topic, this is literally true. You can go look it up yourself. More than 20,000 people have watched those videos. 20,000. So what's this mentality? So when people don't want to do that, what is it? It's a slave mentality. When people don't want to watch content and invest the time to learn, it's a slave mentality. Why? Because it's laziness. The scripture says that it's the glory of God to conceal a thing, and it's the glory of kings to find it. What is that supposed to? That's from the Proverbs. What's it supposed to teach us? It teaches us that people who want to learn, people who want to find truth, people who want to actually invest the effort to find the answers, those are kings. Slaves and servants don't want to do that. They just want the easy life. They're not interested in the truth. And for one thing, as we've talked previously, truth often requires a change, a real change, a substantive change. Just like if you learn the truth that something you're doing or perhaps eating, is not healthy, well, then that requires change. That requires change. Otherwise, you're going to continue to potentially deteriorate. So therefore, people avoid finding out if that is in fact, the problem, because why? They don't want to change. It's a slave mentality. Slave mentalities don't like change. Slave mentalities don't want to invest effort. Here, the slave mentality is that, even though we're suffering in Egypt, and even though it's a hard life, and even though we don't have freedom, we're willing to exchange that for a little bit of security. Some leeks by the Nile, some rags, and there's plenty of people who are willing to sacrifice these kind of things in order just to be taken care of. That's why people, that's why so few people are successful, is because, people are risk averse. That's another aspect of it. What does it mean to be risk averse? It means that, you don't want to take a risk. You're scared of taking a risk. And those kinds of people will never be successful because in order to be successful in life, you have to take risk. Why don't people want to watch the content of the videos sometimes? Because they don't want to risk the reality that what they have believed and what they currently believe is false. They're risk averse. If I watch this video and this person presents an argument and I don't have an answer, I don't know what to do. So I'm going to not watch the video and just continue to argue my point. It's just all a slave mentality. And we have to be careful about this slave mentality. I'm preaching to the choir here because you're on this program now, most of you, because you're not risk averse, because you have the mentality of a king, because you go out of your way to find truth, and it separates you from the crowd. It separates you from people who aren't willing to do this. So let's look at Rabbi Torski of blessed memory, who himself was a psychiatrist like me. Only he was actually educated and credentialed, but who cares? But anyway, let's see what Rabbi Torski has to say about the mentality that is going on here. He is addressing chapter 13 and verse 17, where it says that it happened when Pharaoh sent out the people that God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines because it was near. For God said, perhaps the people will reconsider when they see war, and they will return to Egypt. In other words, God knew they still had the slave mentality. If they saw war, they'd want to go right back to Egypt, which is, of course, exactly what happened. Okay. So it says it's rather difficult to fathom the mentality of the Israelites who were freed from Egyptian bondage. The Torah tells us that they were subjugated to backbreaking labor and that their newborn sons were thrown into the Nile. The Midrash adds that Pharaoh had their children slain so that he could bathe in their blood. If a Jew did not supply his quota of bricks, his child would be cemented into the wall. Yet on several occasions, when conditions in the desert were arduous, they expressed a longing for Egypt and a willingness to return. But it would seem that anything, even death, would be preferable to the inhumane cruelty they suffered in Egypt. You would think that death would be better than the inhumane cruelty. Now, look, I don't know what it's like now in the Marine Corps, but I thought about this the other day when we were talking about the hostages being released from in Gaza. And now I understand that the majority of the hostages were civilians, so I totally get that. But I do want to point out, because it mentions here that that death is preferable than inhumane cruelty. When I was in the infantry, and we had a creed, and part of the creed was surrender is not in our creed. And I was told back then that the Marine Corps learned this from the war with Japan, that when we surrendered, that the Japanese basically would they're extraordinarily cruel, and it was being held as a prisoner of war in Japan, you were tortured and so forth and so on. So the Marine Corps learned this valuable lesson, and as a result, the Marine Corps has a motto. The motto is, one of them anyway, surrender is not in our creed. Marines do not surrender. There's a famous scene of the fall of Saigon and the Vietnam War that ended, and there was a group of Marines on top of the American embassy, and they thought that they had missed the last helicopter, and that was it. They're there, and the place is being surrounded by Viet Cong and other opposing forces. And there's video of the Marines on top of that embassy, and they're just loading their weapons. And then a helicopter comes and rescues them. That's all great. The point is that we have to understand that sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, there's things in life that are worse than death. And as a result, we were always trained with the mentality in the Marine Corps that you'll never see a white flag over a Marine unit ever. Okay. So we have to understand in our life, how do we translate that into the spiritual world? And the answer is we will never surrender truth for any reason, not in order to be convenient. And you know what? You could say not in order to be convenient so that you could live in the world and eat what you want and do what you want and kind of blend in with society, assimilate into society. But what about the other side of the coin? What about the mentality of these people who surrender the truth that Yeshua is the Messiah just so that they can be accepted in the wider Jewish world? What about that mentality? Do we need to address that? Do we need to talk about the people who have surrendered what they know to be true only so that they can they don't experience that sociology of being rejected? Because and by the way, rejected, as a Jew, to be rejected by other Jews based on who I believe the Messiah is actually not Jewish. It's completely forbidden. There's nowhere in Jewish law that would forbid me from being a legitimate Jew just because I believe in a particular Messiah. It does not exist. There's nowhere in Jewish law that says you're not allowed to believe in Yeshua. There's nowhere in Jewish law that says anything about what you believe about the Messiah. You just have to believe in a Messiah, period. But there's nothing specific about that one way or the other. Why? Because it's such an esoteric concept that you can't codify it in law. So it's not supposed to be part of the equation. So therefore, if a Jewish person, if another Orthodox rabbi rejects me because of my faith in Yeshua, that's, well, to put it in American terms, that's unconstitutional. So why would I want to surrender my true faith in the Messiah just so that that person will like me? That's in my opinion, that's a psychological problem. It's very weak-minded to live your life so that you'll be liked or accepted by people that you don't even know, by the way. You ever known somebody that lives their life trying to please everybody, and most of them, 90% of them, are strangers? And so again, I'm not talking about social norms. I'm not talking about going out and being a menace to society. We all have. There are always social norms, respectful things that we do. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about surrendering truth because you want to please somebody else. So going back to our text here, why do they want to go back to Egypt where there's cruelty and death? They would rather do that. They'd rather sacrifice their freedom for a little bit of security. That, by the way, is always a bad idea. Hey, give us your guns. Hey, give us your freedom. But don't worry, we'll keep you safe. By the way, I saw, speaking of that, I saw a clip yesterday, and it was such a great clip. There was a Chinese woman. She had immigrated legally from China, had become an American citizen. And upon becoming an American citizen, she had acquired firearms, which in China, she was not allowed to have. And she was talking to a politician who was more of a liberal mindset, and who wanted to have very strict gun control. Really, truth be told, didn't want anybody to have a gun. And this Chinese lady, in a very thick Chinese accent, asked him if he could promise her that the government would never become tyrannical. Could he guarantee her of that fact? And of course, his answer was, well, no, I can't guarantee. I mean, I can't read the future. I can't guarantee that the government wouldn't become tyrannical. And she says, great, thank you. You've just given the argument as why I'll never give away my guns. Because of that very fact. I thought it was a great argument, but it does make a lot of sense that we're not going to surrender our freedom for the sake of security. And in this case, bring it to a spiritual level. We're not going to surrender truth just so that our life is more convenient. Okay. So it says the divine promise was, I shall take you out from under the burdens of Egypt. Exodus 6:6. Rabbi Yitzhak Mirag of Gur says that the Hebrew word for burdens, sivlos, also means tolerance. That is, the Israelites had become tolerant of their enslavement in spite of its inhuman conditions. They had adjusted and accommodated to what appears to be the intolerable. Okay. Now, listen to this narrative that Rabbi Torski shares, and it's a somewhat of a comical narrative, but it's a true it's a true story, and it really illustrates this point of the slave mentality. Right, Rabbi Nochem of Chernobyl lodged at an inn, as was his custom, he arose at midnight to recite the lamentations over the fall of Jerusalem and the loss of the temple. The innkeeper, hearing his wailing, arose to see what was troubling him, and as he could not understand why Rabbi Nochem was sitting on the ground crying, Rabbi Nochem explained how we continually mourn the loss of our land and our exile into the diaspora. He explained that we cry that God would hasten the ultimate redemption when Moshiach will take us out of exile and lead us back to Jerusalem. The innkeeper asked him, "Will we all go to Jerusalem?" "Well, of course," Rabbi Nochem said. So the innkeeper said, but what will be of my little farm and my cows and my chickens?" And then Rabbi Nochem said, "Of what account are they compared to our being in exile? We are repeatedly attacked by the Tartars." The Tartars were a Turkish-speaking group. "They carry out pogroms and killing and pillaging our people. In Jerusalem, we will be free of such persecutions." The innkeeper was not satisfied, and he said, "I must ask my wife about this." When the innkeeper told his wife what Rabbi Nochem said about the redemption of Moshiach, she said, "How can we leave our farm and the cows and the chickens we worked so hard to get?" The innkeeper then explained how we would be free of the destructive pogroms by the bands of Tartars. And the wife thought a bit about it, and she said, "Go tell the rabbi that when Moshiach comes, he should take the Tartars to Jerusalem, and we can live here in peace." Now, Rabbi Torski says, "We may laugh at this, but let us be honest with ourselves. We have our comfortable, furnished homes. We enjoy our lifestyle in exile. When we hear the sound of the shofar of Moshiach summoning us to follow him to the Holy Land, will we be able to leave everything behind and follow him to Jerusalem? Perhaps like the innkeeper's wife and like our ancestors of Egypt, we may have adjusted to life in exile. It's amazing to see what we can accommodate. Like Moshe, Moshiach will lead us to a life of spiritual heights. We must be truthful with ourselves. What are our aspirations? Are we ready to trade in our physical comforts to be in the presence of the glory of God that will again reside in Jerusalem?" Now, I happen to believe that when the Moshiach returns, maybe sooner or time, that there will be, it'll be a astronomical event, and so it's not going to be so mundane as this particular presentation. But I do think prior to that, in our present era, that we have this kind of mentality. People are said, this is how you live for God. This is how you follow the Moshiach. The point of the fact is that most people aren't willing to follow the Moshiach. You might wonder why it is that your friends and your family and perhaps your coworkers don't want to live a Lapid life. The truth of the matter is because they don't want to follow the Moshiach. Not really. Do they want the benefits? Well, of course, everybody wants the benefits. Does everybody want to have a nice, healthy, athletic body? Well, of course, everybody wants that. I don't know of anybody who say, "I don't want that. I don't want anything to do with that." Many people want that. Very, very few people, about 1% of the population actually, are willing to do what it takes to achieve that. And so that's the reality. Everybody wants the benefit. Few people are willing to do what it takes to garner the benefit. Everybody wants the truth, but they're not willing to dig for it. They're not kings. Not everybody is a king. That's the reality. So here's another insight from Rabbi Torski related to this topic. He said, in the previous essay, we expressed our dismay at how the Israelites, who had suffered so bitterly during their enslavement in Egypt, could possibly have wanted to return there. The author of Sha'ar Bas Rabim provides us with an important psychological insight. He says, please allow me a bit of levity to share an appropriate anecdote. A candidate for re-election was making the rounds of his constituency to reinforce his support. He addressed one of his constituents saying, Clem, I'm sure I can count on you for your vote. Nope, Clem said, I think I'm going to vote for the other guy. Why would you do that? The candidate asked. Did you forget how much I did for you? Don't you remember when your farm was up for the sheriff's sale? I was able to get you a government loan to keep the farm? Yep, Clem said, I remember. Okay, well, and remember your son when he was drafted in the army and you said you needed him to be on the farm, so I got a hardship exemption for him. Remember that? Yep, Clem said, I remember that. Okay, well, have you forgotten how I was able to get your mother into a nursing home without any cost to you? Don't you remember that? Yep, Clem said, I remember. Well, the candidate asked, well, then why would you vote for my opponent? And Clem said, well, what have you done for me lately? So it says, some people's memories do not go beyond yesterday. The years of favors Clem received had no impact on what he was going to do right now. This is how it was, it says, Rabbi Torski writes, this is how it was with the Israelites who left Egypt. Although they had suffered inhumane cruelty for decades, the last day was one on which the Egyptians lent them gold, silver, and garments. Exodus 12 and verse 36. When Pharaoh sent them off, he said to Moses, please bless me. The last day was a pleasant one, on which they were enriched and honored. The single pleasant day obscured the decades of suffering. And because of this recent benevolent attitude of the Egyptians, the Israelites would have readily returned there. Sha'ar Bas Rabin is pointing out to us that the Torah is teaching us the frailty of human thought and reaction. We must be aware not to be deluded, to allow a brief recent event to cloud our minds and give us a false perception of reality. Before being convinced of any appreciable change in any relationship, we should have firm and enduring indications that there has indeed been a change. We have to avoid the slave mentality that wants to take us back to Egypt. And that's something else that would remind me of that. Something else that Rabbi Torski had written in another publication. He was writing about a couple who had not been religious, but then had decided to become religious, Jewishly, of course. And they wrote to him that after having become religious, they faced all kinds of hardships, all kinds of adversity. And they were asking the rabbi, what could be the cause? Why is it we're facing this adversity? You would think that if we take upon ourselves the covenant, that the opposite would be true. And his response was, I don't know. But maybe this is some type of refinement. Maybe this adversity is making you stronger. And I'll leave us with that. Some of you could possibly relate to that mentality, to that idea. I've taken upon myself the covenant of Torah. I'm facing adversity. Now, see, the church mentality, the uncircumcised mind will tell you that, listen, if you come to JC, your life, oh man, he's going to, we just heard this yesterday. In fact, Rebbe and I were watching something and the little thing popped up and this lady was like, I know one thing about JC, that when life is dark, he makes it brighter and all this kind of stuff. And basically what she's selling is, if you believe in JC, then all your struggles and worries and life will just become a bowl of cherries. And a mature person, this person who was sharing that happened to be very young. A mature person knows that's not true. In other words, just because you're walking in truth doesn't mean that your life is going to be a bowl of cherries. But see, that's what a lot of people are sold. So this couple who is, you're right, Roy, Baal Tshuva, Baalei Teshuvot, they were maybe believing that if they took on themselves the life of Torah, that life would be awesome. The reality is that sometimes the life of Torah will lead you to the wilderness. That's why Yeshua said, "Are you really willing to follow me? Because foxes have holes and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Are we willing to pursue truth for the sake of truth? A lot of successful people, when they were first getting started, had to really suffer. A lot of them lost everything before they gained everything. See, a lot of people aren't willing to do that. A lot of people aren't willing to take those risks. A lot of people are not willing to suffer the short-term adversity for the long-term gain. But are we willing? Can we press through that slave mentality? That's, right now, Lapid Judaism, you say, well, golly, as a Lapid Jew, I feel alienated from Christians, to include messianics who are just Christians. I feel alienated from traditional Jews who don't accept. I feel alienated. Well, that's right now. You're in the short-term adversity. That may not be true, and probably won't be true if Messiah tarries for your children or grandchildren. But see, if we never face the short-term adversity, then we'll never see the long-term gain. If you never take the risk for the company, you'll never have a company. You have to start somewhere, and that's where we are. End of our Aliyah today. Thank you so much for being a part of the program today. Please be sure and contribute to our digital sign campaign. That would be fantastic. I think we're around 15,000, a little bit more. Maybe we're pushing 16, I'm sure. But let's get there as sooner rather than later. We need to get that sign up so we can reach more and more people. Thank you for liking this video, sharing with all of your friends, commenting on it, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, have a great and amazing day.